All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our Medical Student Monday. Today is all about rank lists. I'm Brianna. I'm the AAEM RSA Medical Student Council Western Regional Representative, and we have four wonderful panelists with us here today. So I'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with questions.
I can go ahead and get started. My name is Ryan Deskamp. I'm a PGY2 from the University of Chicago in Chicago. I did medical school as well as undergrad at Indiana University. And currently I am one of the board members for AAEM RSA and liaison to our wellness committee.
Dr. Parks, do you want to go?
Yeah. So I'm Caitlin Parks, and I'm a PGY2 at Washington University in St. Louis, or Barnes Jewish Hospital. I went to Oklahoma State, and I lived in San Francisco for a long time doing EMS and dancing there. I was involved in AAEM as a medical student and was the Midwest regional rep, as well as just kind of involved as an ambassador. And then now I'm on the EMS committee.
Dr. McCuller, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm Chris McCullough. I'm a PGY1 at UMC in Jackson, Mississippi. Did medical school at LSU Health in Shreveport, grew up in Shreveport, was in the middle of EMS training when I got into med school and never finished.
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everybody. Danny Exilian. I am currently one of the PGY3s here at University of Chicago with Ryan as well. I'm originally from Haiti. Moved over here when I was young, lived primarily in Florida, did my med school down in Miami over at FIU and University of Miami for undergrad, and then came up here. I'm currently serving as one of the co-chairs for the AAEM RSA Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and happy to be here.
Well, welcome. We are so excited to have you here and your expertise on rank lists. And just for everyone that's watching out there, if you do have any questions at all, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll try and ask them. If you have any specific questions for one of the panelists, you can also direct it towards them. So we'll start off with just kind of the first question that I think a lot of people, although this year is different and we didn't get to rotate at as many sites as we would have liked to, did you guys rank places that you rotated at highly on your list, or was it places that you just interviewed at?
So I can start. I rotated at many places. I was very anxious and as a DO applicant, and I had a pretty crummy step 1 score. So I had no idea like where my competitiveness was. I honestly expected to match at a place that I rotated, but I really loved my interview and kind of everything I had heard and learned about WashU. And so that actually was a little bit of an unexpected thing, especially for my family to have ended up ranking it where I did because of, my great experiences at all the places that I rotated. So I guess, that would be kind of, for the most part, the places that I rotated were places I really wanted to go. And so I had them very high on the list as well. But my interview and pre-interview dinner and all that kind of changed my mind too about a place that I didn't know as much about. And it's been fantastic too, so.
At least for me, I guess I rotated at like 3 places, one being my home institution and the others were 2 aways. And I did rank those pretty highly, but the one I ranked highest, which was University of Chicago here, is not someplace I rotated at. It was just someplace I fell in love with during the interview process. So I think it's hard unless you had a really bad experience to not rank the places that you did rotate at somewhere towards the top of your chart, but do not be surprised if, you go on an interview trail and you just feel really connected with a program and that just shoots to the top.
So I also had a pretty crummy step score. It started with a 2 and that was about all I could say. So I ended up having to reach out to people, pretty much had to beg for an away rotation. ended up loving it there. They wound up being my second choice, but I found this one on the interview trail as well.
And then I also rotated at two different institutions other than my home institution. After rotating at those places, realized that I couldn't really see myself there, which was very important because there were things about those programs that I really liked and things about those programs that I wasn't so sure about. And so I kind of used my ways to kind of pick the things that I liked in a program and try and find a program that had all of those. My places that I rotated at ended up kind of towards the middle of my list.
Wow, so it sounds like pretty much everyone matched a place that they didn't rotate at, but it's nice to hear that that is definitely possible. So another question that I know I am asking myself, and I know a lot of other people are asking, is 3 years versus 4 years. Did you apply to one or the other? Did you apply to both? And did that play a factor on your rank list?
I can go ahead and start. I was not super sure about a 3-year versus a 4-year. As I was going in, I didn't know if I, really wanted to stay in academics. I didn't know if I really wanted to go into the community, and I wasn't super sure if one of them was more right for me than the other. So I did end up applying to both, and both types of programs did end up towards the top of my list. I will say I was very big on location. I grew up in the Midwest. I kind of really knew I wanted to stay in the Midwest. And so some Midwest 4-year programs ended up pretty high on my program or on my rank list. And I think a lot of that was actually because of location and not necessarily the 4 years. So because I wasn't super sold on 3 versus 4, that wasn't as big of a factor for me. But because I was really, really interested in, the location I was going to be, that kind of raised those programs towards the top for me.
I'd probably say something similar to Ryan. I think it's really tough to know between 3 and 4 years, like during, like your 3rd and 4th year of medical school, because people will tell you a bunch of different things. So all the other factors that came into play that I cared about, I just put those towards the lead, whether it was location, weather, family around me, things like that, and what I was looking for in the program. And so I had a mix of 3 and 4s towards the top of my list, which I was kind of surprised about. And then if I was able to find what I was looking for in a 3-year program, then I'm going with the 3-year program because it's just shorter. And if I wasn't, then I would have gone towards a 4-year program in that instance. But it wasn't the main deciding factor in how I was choosing how to put my rank list.
Yeah, and I would just kind of echo what you guys have been saying. I think I had 3s and 4s, and then 3s and then 4s in kind of the clump. And it was like, I really felt like the 1 year, people talk about the pay or, on one hand, you're giving up a year of attending pay, but on the other hand, like you have better training. And so you won't get in a lawsuit and you'll save the money. Like to me, it really didn't come, like none of that really factored in. I was really trying to find a place that was a good fit. And I felt like having a good quality of life for 4 years would be better than a not as good quality of life for 3, and chose a program that had quite a lot of flexibility with their electives in the 4 years. And so, I had a baby this December and have been able to change my schedule around really flexibly just to pursue my interests, like in disaster medicine. I got to go do incident command for a month, and to kind of fit in with my everyday life that is kind of continuing alongside residency. So I think in med school, I just kind of put everything aside. I'm really focused on med school, but it's hard to just do that indefinitely. And so for me, picking a program that was a good fit was far more important than the 3 versus 4. And so, I think it fell somewhere on the master spreadsheet of I probably would prefer a 3 because then I'm done sooner. But I'm actually really glad that I'm in a 4-year program now.
I only interviewed at 3-year programs, so I don't have much to add here. I applied to both, only interviewed at 3 years.
So you guys kind of touched on this a little bit. So maybe 3 versus 4-year didn't really play in, but I know some of you guys have mentioned location or, things that you're interested in. So if you could maybe boil it down to the top 3 things that you looked for or that you were really grading, I guess, if you want to say that, in a program to put it high on your rank list, what would those 3 things be?
I mean, I think so I like made a little spreadsheet and I had like the top 3 things and they had multiplied by a factor of 2. And then I had like the middle, like 8 to 10 things, whatever. So the top 3 things like on my spreadsheet was like really excellent training. I wanted a kind of county population and an academic kind of university feel to like provide resources and also really advanced education. The thing that I found was like many of the places that I really loved had that combination. And so like at some point you can just check that box. And then what was a little bit more complicated was hashing out some of the other kind of priorities within that. And so, yeah, my top 3 were those, but I think, you know, it kind of came down to a lot of quality of life and flexibility in the program and really good support in the program to kind of do what I wanted to do.
I did the spreadsheet route too, and very similar format. I think we're all like type A. So I had all these things listed and they all had the factors and weighted based off of that. And the top 3 that I had, the number 1 thing was Gestalt, which was like my gut feeling, and that was weighted the most for whatever that's worth. And then after that, I had the residents. So if I connected with the residents or I felt like the residents there reflected like people who I wanted to be or physicians I wanted to be in the future, then that was towards the top. I think that was 2. And then the third one was a combination of location and the patient population, which I felt like tied in with each other. So depending where you were at was probably where like the type of people that you were going to be treating for the first place anyway. So I think those were my top 3.
So we had a baby on the way this time. Yeah, this time last year. She's not quite 1. So that played a big role. Location, based on how far we were from both of our families. Our families are about an hour apart. So that played a big role. Did I get the feeling that the program was really family friendly? And if that was the case, you know, that brought it up some more. And then kind of fellowship opportunities, because I pretty sure I still want to do a fellowship at some point, and this one had a really good EMS opportunity. But I didn't do a spreadsheet. It was a lot of Gestalt.
And my top 3, I would say, was diversity in both co-residents as well as patient population. I really wanted to learn next to individuals different than me that were going to teach me every day and had different life experiences than I've had. Similarly, I wanted to treat patients who were different than me and that they were going to teach me about life experience as well. Location was really important for me. Like I said, Midwest was, you know, up there for me. I grew up in the Midwest. My whole family is in the Midwest. My support system is in the Midwest. And so I knew that was a place that I was going to thrive. Going somewhere that I had never been before without connections. Some people can do that and can thrive. I knew I was not going to be that person. So might as well try and set myself up for success. And then number 3 was, let's see, I'd probably have to say Gestalt. That was definitely part of it. When I initially made that 3 in my head a couple minutes ago, the diversity of the patients, the diversity of the residents were 2 separate things, but I combined them. So I just had to make up a third one right then. But Gestalt would probably be it.
So we have a couple questions in the chat, and I think for us as well. So for all of us 4th years who are on, who have done all the Zoom interviews, do you have any tips for the, you know, feeling or the fit that you guys are all talking about, but through Zoom? And maybe how, you know, obviously we're done with interviews now, but maybe how we could have gotten that feeling during our Zoom interviews, and also if they are continuing with the Zoom interviews next year.
It's, oh, go for it.
I had some really good tips given to me by a mentor of mine when I was going on this route way back when. So I think a few things. One was they kind of encouraged me right after I had the interviews. I know it's a little bit past that now, but right after I had each interview to either write something down about it, about how I felt about the program, or literally do a video of myself talking about the program, which just seemed odd to me. And I felt a little weird about that. But a lot of other people I know have done that and they had good successes with that. I went for the writing route. So I just wrote stuff down and I was able to reflect on how I felt about these things afterwards. The second thing is when you go to a program you really feel good about, you tend to tell some people about it. So if there are people that you trust around or like really close family members or friends, you would tell them like, oh yeah, I went to interview here and I really liked it and stuff. And it kind of sticks with them and they don't hear from you for a while you're doing the interview trail. So then you go back to them and you're like, oh, I'm trying to decide between this and this and this. And they actually go to you and they're like, well, you really like this program and this is what you were raving about there. And then so I took that into account. I was like, okay, you're right, because I forgot, but clearly I only came to you about like these 4 programs and stuff like that. So that helped me boost it up. And I think the last thing is, now that it's past this and maybe you can't remember the program as well as you would want to, but are you still having that gut feeling about it? Just talk to as many people as you can. Contact the residents there, contact their program director if you can. They're super busy, so it's a little bit hectic to do that. But as many residents that you can get in contact with, I'd recommend doing that and see how you connect with those people. And they will point you in the right direction of somebody who might be from the same area as you and had to go through the same thing, or might have the same background as you and might be going through the same thing, or had the same questions that you had, and has the same similarities. And those people might be the people that guide you towards like, oh, I have a better gut feeling about this. So those were kind of like the 3 big things that I used.
Yeah, I completely echo what you said, Danny. I think I didn't think I had to do the video. That would have been really helpful. I did talk with my boyfriend at the time and my mom. And so they were able to give that feedback about like, hey, you really seem to like this place, or like you were really happy about this aspect of this place. The other thing that I did, and you mentioned doing too, Danny, was the big spreadsheet. I felt like, how do I know what a gut feeling is? Like, I don't want to make a gut feeling. I want to go to the best program. It's the best fit. And I would think about it. And for me, making that spreadsheet really helped me, like, number one, identify what my priorities were and kind of weight them. And number two, it shifted dramatically some of the programs that I didn't realize that I wanted to go to as much. Now, it didn't change it from like bottom of my list to top of my list, but it really made me take a second look at places that when I did this kind of intellectual analysis of it, they jumped really high. And so they did actually end up ranked higher on my list because of that. Not exactly where the math all put it out to be. And then I think that's another thing, is if you do something that seems more of an objective way and then you're like, I don't really like that. That may be another way of kind of like the negative way of finding out what your gut feeling is. I've heard some people just say like, put one on top, flip a coin, and if you're not happy with it, then, well, that wasn't the right one. So I think you could go both ways and get feedback about how you feel about it that way.
So I ended up calling my wife after each one of the interviews and kind of talked about everything that I liked about the different programs, right after it happened. So once it got to this point, I was able to, we were able to sit down and talk about it. Not only what I liked about it, but also, it's a decision for your partner if you have one, because if they're going to be following you, they're going to be living there for 3-4 years, sans a fellowship. But she was able to help a lot with, you really liked this about that program, or, you liked this, but that really doesn't seem that important. Was it really that important? But talking with people that you trust, can kind of help with that.
I agree with everything that's said. The only thing I want to add is try and think back to the interviews you had and think if there was somewhere you really had fun. Like, did you walk out of the interview and be like, that was so fun to spend my day doing that? I know it's Zoom and it's hard to say that about anything, but I'm sure there were a couple programs where you're like, oh my gosh, that was dreadful. I'm so exhausted. I'm so glad they said this is over, and kind of use that to get that feeling. Because a lot of those feelings come from the interactions you had during those Zooms.
Yeah, I think that everything you guys have said is definitely how I felt coming out of each interview. If I didn't write down that day how I felt about it, within like a week to 2 weeks, I had totally forgotten about, most of the details of that day. So I think that that's really helpful advice among everything else that you shared. So one other question that we had kind of about making your decision for your rank list is, did you talk to residents and, maybe the jobs that the third or fourth years were getting or the fellowships that they were getting into, did that play a role in choosing a program?
For me, it definitely did. I was not sure if I wanted to go into academics and fellowship or if I wanted to go into, a more community-based practice when I finished residency. And so for me, it was really important to see a program that was producing excellent physicians that were going into both. I didn't necessarily want a program where everybody was going into academics afterwards, because I felt like maybe if I decided I didn't want to do that, maybe I wouldn't feel as supported there. And similar the other way around. I didn't want somewhere where everybody was just going out into the community, and that if I decided later that I wanted to do academics, I wanted to feel supported. So that was really important to me, to see where they were going and to see that diversity, because I didn't know what I was going to do.
Diversity was a big part for me too, because again, I think I want to do a fellowship, but I'm not 100% sure. It's still pretty early. I'm still leaning towards EMS though, and one of the guys that I interviewed with was a chief resident last year, and he was going into his EMS fellowship. So getting to hear, what led him to that, what kind of built him up for that as well. We sat through the interview, just pretty much talked about EMS and some of the different research there, and probably the easiest interview I had all year.
And I think I talked a lot with the residents, especially kind of trying to decide between my top three was really hard. And part of it was like, I don't even know, like I could spend hours and hours and I not even be ranked at these places. And so why do it? But I also felt like I have to, like, I could be at one of these places. And so if it falls to me, I should make the right choice. So between those three, I did reach out to residents in those programs and people that had graduated to get their thoughts more on the program rather than where they were going. Similar to what Ryan was saying, like I do like that people are going in a lot of different directions from the some of the places that but between my top choices, I don't think there was a big difference in that. The other thing that's probably worth saying is, like, if you were like me, probably losing your mind just a little bit with the stress of this, like you can do what you want to do from any of these programs. They are all going to make you a good doctor. And it is so hard. It is so hard to like believe that and understand it. And so I think just kind of taking a little bit of the pressure off yourself that it is a big decision. But like you can go anywhere from these programs if you're willing to put in the work. And so kind of maybe taking that down a notch and looking at kind of the day-to-day, like what is your commute going to look like? Can you afford a house? Do you want an apartment? Is there like places that you can walk to or ride your bike or whatever it is that kind of helps balance things out? I was very driven about like just the academic and like medicine side of things. And it's helped like being here to really understand like actually my day-to-day quality of life is really phenomenal. And that allows me to have more energy to study and allows me to kind of bring more of myself to the table with my patients and some of the long days and call like that.
I think what Caitlin just said was huge, and something I probably didn't think about as much, because, like you said, you have so much angst about wondering, like, oh, am I gonna go to the best program I could possibly go to? That type of feeling. But I would echo what Ryan and Chris said. A big thing was like diversity for me. I didn't know if I wanted to do sports med. I didn't know if I was going to do ultrasound, admin, or just go into the community. But I wanted the option to do all of them, right? So once I was able to find that in a program, I was like, okay, I'll have the capability of being a phenomenal physician. I'll be well trained, but I want access to those next steps. And once I knew I would be able to find it at these particular programs, those started climbing up the list.
Can I jump in real quick on something a little, okay. If you're gonna buy a house, reach out, find a realtor on match day because it gets a little cutthroat.
Yeah, but I like was gonna rent and I like went and looked at places to rent and I found a realtor like I don't know, it was a month ahead. It was a little bit closer than I would have liked, but it worked out okay as well.
We lost out on a house that we thought we absolutely loved, so.
Thank you for sharing that advice, especially right now. I know that the housing market in a lot of places is very, it's a seller's market. So houses go super fast. So Dr. Parks, you kind of touched on this and maybe this question came up in the chat. So maybe you could all touch on it, but did you have your top 2 or top 3 programs, maybe even top 4 that you were like constantly switching back and forth? And once you how did you decide finally, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, or, some variation of that. So if you had a couple that you were really tight between, how did you finally decide where to put them?
So my number 1 was my number 1 far and away. My number 2 and 3 were pretty close, and it really came down to, do I want to stay in a city where I grew up, or do I want to go somewhere else? And I just wanted something different.
So for me, I had advice and I probably wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if I'd give this advice to anybody else, but I ended up in a good spot. So whatever. The advice I was given was to not talk about like family stuff. As a woman going into a male dominated field, it was actually suggested I don't even wear my wedding ring. And people don't ask you those kinds of personal questions unless you kind of have something going forward for that. And so I kept that really kind of personal as my personal life. And so it's personal because I was nervous if a program, heard that I wanted to have a kid, if they would rank me lower. And I don't know that it's not appropriate, but I don't know if that's real life or not. But I came down to I know so much about kind of the top 4 or 5 programs on my list, and I really would be happy at all of them. And it actually came down to it would be helpful for me to know how it would be received if I had a kid during residency. And so I still didn't feel comfortable talking to program directors about it, which I don't know if that's a thing that you should either. And so I kind of reached out to residents and asked a couple of questions and then kind of felt it out. And then I kind of asked about having a baby, because I had seen some programs advertise kind of family friendly, and they've got events that your kids are welcome to, but most of them were men whose female partners were the ones having the kids and generally staying at home and caring for them. And so it felt a little bit different to understand how it would be received. And some of that really honest kind of question that I had and getting that answered helped shift some places around a little bit. So I would encourage you, most places have their residents have contact info. I mean, as far as I know, I think our rank list is already done and certified. So the point from now, having contact with the residents, nothing's going to change where you're ranked in their list. Once that's certified, it's already done. So you might double check the dates and be sure that that's right if that makes you nervous, but reach out to the residents and ask the burning question. If there's something that you weren't comfortable asking or you felt whatever, I would encourage you to reach out to the residents and see if you can get a really genuine answer about it, because it might change where you rank, especially when they're so good, such good options that you have,
Yeah, I'd reiterate talking to the residents as much as you can and getting that feel for it to, tease out between 1 through 3 or 1 through 4. And I think the spreadsheet helped me a lot, because I was able to see at least objectively how I was thinking of things, and things would flip around, and then I'd have my gestalt column and things would go back and forth. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at these things and you're talking to your friends or family members that are giving you advice, there's always something tugging you in a particular direction about one of them. And then you try to counteract that with something else in the back of your head, whatever it may be, like, well, the location isn't that great. And it helped you, the spreadsheet helped me figure out, like, well, did I really care about that as opposed to like the residents and all this other stuff that this place is excelling at that I cared about way more. So that helped me tease out between 1 through 3.
And then for me, a big thing that helped me kind of shuffle the top of my list was location. I am a person that really enjoys life outside the hospital and knew that, like I said, in order to be successful and in order to thrive in a place, I needed to have that social interaction outside the hospital. And so I had to picture myself in these cities and say, how easy is it going to be for me to find a friend circle? Is this, a city where, it's kind of big city blocks where lots of people are close together? Or would it be, more suburban living where people are farther apart? So that played a huge role in where my top programs landed. Just making sure that I was going to be in a city that I was going to love and thrive in.
So once you guys did decide, and Dr. Parks, I know you kind of mentioned this in the chat too, you're one step ahead of me today. Once you decided your top program, your top 2 or 3, did you send an email to your top program letting them know that they were your number 1? And then at the same time, did you send ones to like 2 or 3 saying like, oh, you're highly ranked, but not necessarily using that number 1 verbiage? And how would you guys kind of just advise, to send emails, to not send emails, and kind of how to go about that?
I always say that if somewhere is for sure your number 1, you're not going to change, and that's it, signed, sealed, delivered. If you feel comfortable, let that program director know. I wouldn't do it to other programs just because if it doesn't say number 1, all you've just told that program is you're not my number 1. Program directors get these letters all the time. They know what they mean. The biggest thing is if that changes, you have to tell them. Don't say that they're your number 1 and then decide last minute you're going to change it and then not tell them. Because open communication is very important, especially in emergency medicine, which is a small world.
I'd 100% echo that. I don't really have anything else to add on top of that.
I didn't write one. I figured if anything, it would do harm. Like Ryan was saying, these program directors are getting hundreds of these emails every year. I felt like even a genuine email might come across looking like a tryhard or something and just kill my shot for whatever reason.
So on that same note, did you have any programs reach out to you? And if they did reach out to you and told you, you're highly ranked, or however they use the terms, did that change their position on your rank list?
There were a few programs that reached out, whether that be residents reaching out and saying, you'd be a great fit with us, or, faculty reaching out saying, we really enjoyed having you. Do you have any other questions? They never said, you're the top of the list, you're the middle of the list. But I didn't let that influence my list because the match process is favoring the applicants. And so I wanted the list to be my list and not the list that I thought I was going to be on for someone else.
100%. Don't let that change where you rank them.
Yeah, if anything, take that as a sign like, well, it looks like I'm doing something right, so I should make my list how I want it to go because they want me. So just take it as that.
That's good to know. I know that, those emails can be a little tricky, and even like, I know people have gotten phone calls and it's like, how do you respond to this phone call, when they're telling you these very nice things. So that's good to know. So for us, we haven't submitted yet. Our submit date is March 2nd, but how did you decide you were ready to submit? Like, how did you certify for the final time? Did you do it the day before the deadline? Did you do it, a couple weeks in advance? Kind of when did you do it, and how did you finally feel at peace with your decision?
I think it's super hard. regardless of which way you go about it. And you'll flip flop. You'll be like, hey, maybe I'm making the wrong decision. You'll look at the list a couple of times. I did mine, I don't know, like as soon as I was sure about my number one, after that, I felt a little bit more at ease. But the rest of the rank list, you'll like teeter and totter back and forth with. And that's difficult. But I just had to set like a deadline for myself of like, hey, I'm going to keep it right here and then just leave it alone. Unless something catastrophic happens or a life-changing event happens, then I'll go back and change it. But the week leading up to it, I just kind of left it alone and didn't want to look at it again. And I tried to minimize conversations about it so that I wouldn't be doing this flip-flop back and forth type of thing.
Yeah, same. I feel like I was not ever at ease with it. So maybe that's kind of a high expectation to have. I think it's just a really stressful time. And but you know, like Danny, I it was maybe a couple of weeks ahead of time that I kind of finished, and then I was like, okay. I think I had checked it a couple of times and like you said, switched a couple of things here and there, but yeah, I tried to not perseverate and like take out my anxiety on the computer system as like once it's decided, I'm going to put it in there and just put it in there. I actually know someone that like at the last minute was like, oh wait, maybe I should change these. And then it like timed out like midnight, like who's doing that? Don't do that to yourself, because then like, are you second? I don't know. Like that's just too much. So make a decision and just do it and like be stressed about it. But like, yeah, don't change things at midnight.
Part of my strategy for when to submit it was just at the end of pure exhaustion. I had gone through all of the interviews. You have gone through so many different scenarios in your head. And at some point, there's a point of diminishing returns, and all you're doing is just hurting your self-esteem and hurting your brain power by just keep going on. And once you get down to like, you know, maybe it's just like numbers 9 and 10 you're flipping around, but everything else is staying the same, I think you're in a good spot. And yes, don't do it the day of. That's just going to stress you out.
I think I did a week and a half in advance. I finally put it in. Living the fourth year best life. I think I had a couple of beers and like just decided on the couple that I was flip flopping on and just said, okay, I'm done. And that was it.
So basically, when you hit a wall of no longer wanting to deal with it is when you're ready to submit, is what it sounds like. So overall, if you guys are willing to share, are you happy with your decision? And I know Dr. Deskamp, you kind of touched on this, but I think for students, it's, you know, once you get to the other side, you realize that it does maybe favor the student, but it doesn't necessarily feel like that in the moment. So have you guys been happy with your ultimate decision, and like being on your side, does it really favor the student in whatever decision that they make?
I think it does 100%. I could not be happier, and I can't imagine myself anywhere else.
I think it's still all voodoo. But I mean, it worked out for me and I love where I'm at. So I'll, you know, trust the voodoo.
Yeah, I think for me, I was very excited and happy and honestly kind of surprised when I matched. Like I said, I didn't rotate here and I didn't think I would really have a shot at, you know, fancy program I didn't rotate at. And so in the beginning, actually, I was still kind of nervous. Like, is this the right choice? I don't know anybody in St. Louis. Like, I could have gone back to San Francisco maybe with like all my friends there and like the EMS that I worked, you know, I was with San Francisco Fire and these doctors mentored me. And so a little bit of an aside, like don't rank a place because you think they'll like you or that you might burn a bridge. Because as soon as I found out I matched here, I let some of my mentors know and they were already connecting me with people that were here. So if they're your mentors and they're worth it, like they're going to support you wherever you end up going. And I wasn't convinced at the beginning. Like I was very happy, but I was like, I don't know what to expect. And I hadn't been here before. And so it was probably a couple of months in when I really like understood the program, and they paid for a group of us to go to the FIX conference in New York pre-COVID, like the fall of my intern year. And I felt like I haven't done anything for this program to prove that I'm worthy or anything like that. and they're paying my way to go to this conference that's supporting women in emergency medicine. And, so these small examples kind of came out over time that just really validated, like, okay, I made the right choice and I matched at a place that is a really good fit. And, that kind of has shown itself like time and time again. So I think, on one hand, if you're super ecstatic or like still a little bit nervous because you don't know what to expect because you ranked a place you didn't rotate at, I think it would be fair to just trust that it's going to work out great, because most people that I know, including myself, have had really good experiences with it and have been really happy.
Yeah, I'll trust the process. Trust that it's going to work for you, like every one of us has been saying. And I'm originally from Haiti. Like, I'm next to the equator, then was in Miami forever, and down in Florida, and I'm in Chicago, and there's a winter storm out there, and I would 1,000% make my rank list the exact same way again. So no changes there. So extremely happy with my choice.
That's really nice to hear. I feel like whenever you hear that, it just lowers your stress level like a little bit each and every time. So now we have some special consideration questions. So I'm not sure if any of you guys did this or, knew people who did this, but the first question is, did any of you, or do you know anyone that did not rank a program that they interviewed at? If so, how did you decide, or how did they decide to not do that? Or do you think that you should always rank every single program that you interview at?
So I almost didn't rank a program. I didn't have a great experience there. I felt like they didn't even read my application. There were just many things that I didn't have a good feeling about. I talked a lot with some mentors about it because I really wasn't sure, like, do I want to go there or do I want to scramble or soap or whatever? And it kind of came down to me, like, I wanted emergency medicine bad enough to go there and to not match into a different specialty. And so I put it on the list. And so for me, that decision was like, well, if it's as, not a great fit as I felt like it was, then there's always a possibility, be it slight, that I could, change. But also I felt like I could do something hard for 3 or 4 years, and ultimately be in the specialty that I wanted. So I think that those were the questions that I asked myself about it, because I wasn't really happy about it, and I didn't feel like everywhere else I would have been super happy to go to, second to bottom of my list, I would have been really happy to go to. And this one I was just iffy about. So I think those would be questions to ask yourself: is would you be willing to go into a different specialty? Would you be willing to try again next year? And if the answer is no to those, then I'd put them on your list. I didn't get anywhere close to that one, so if that makes you feel a little bit better. But those would be kind of the questions that I asked before I would leave something off your list, because there is a chance that you could change programs, and it is only a finite amount of time. So if it's going to get you to the ultimate goal that you'd like to be in, then I would consider putting it on the list, even if it's at the bottom.
I think that was a stellar answer. Those are the things I would consider, honestly. At least those factors, because it comes down simply to that. Like, everybody's situation is going to be different, but let's say you have, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 programs you can rank versus if you have like 10 or 15, right? So that's going to make a difference. Whether or not this program, you just disliked it so much and you know yourself that well that you're going to be uncomfortable for 3 or 4 years, then don't do it. If you're willing to go through the risk of soaping or not matching and then having to scramble or trying again next year, as opposed to not ranking that program because you just don't want that in your life, then go for it, and don't put them on there. But if you're not willing to say yes to that answer, then I'd say just rank them. Because the other thing is, like, you might be uncomfortable from the brief interaction you had with maybe a few people, but maybe the program itself is okay, right? clearly a bunch of other people have gone through it and they've come out on the other side. So you clearly can do it. So those would probably be the things that I weigh.
I think that's really good advice. I also received the same advice when I had that question, so that's good to know. The next question is dual applying, and I know Dr. McCullough shared that he might talk about his experience with dual applying. So go ahead.
So like I said, my step 1 was pretty garbage. My step 2 was not a whole lot better. So my program director at my home institution told me that I needed to dual apply and be ready to match into my second choice. So I ended up going the EM, IM route. Did all of my internal medicine interviews up at the beginning of the season, and then, ended out on emergency medicine. So I was already exhausted by the time it got to all of my EM interviews. The way that my rank list worked out was 6 emergency medicine and then 6 internal medicine. So I ranked everywhere that I interviewed. It did work out for me. I got my number 1. But I mean, it was really tough, at that halfway point to switch over from, I'm talking about, internal medicine, and my own personal nightmare is clinic. And the only thing that I could ever see myself doing through this is critical care medicine. And then going into emergency medicine where it's like, I love everything, so, it was tough. Again, trust the system. As long as you've got 5, if you get 5, I think the number is something like 85% match into their top 5 or something like that. I know it's easy to think, well, I'm going to be that 15%, but we talk with our patients all the time about these numbers, and just focus on that 85%.
Thank you for sharing that. The next question is about couples matching. So again, I don't know if any of you guys couples matched or know anyone that couples matched, but if you did or do you have any tips for people who are couples matching either both emergency medicine or emergency medicine and another specialty?
Did any of us couples match? Okay, so I can talk. Our program really tries to go out of the way to help people that are couples matching. And so, take it for what it is. I would definitely try and reach out to some people that that have couples matched, and especially recently. I know some basic things that you've already done is apply broadly, et cetera, et cetera. But I would reach out to the program directors. From what I know, at least with our program, they want to know that you're couples matching, and if your partner had an interview, they would like to know that. And I know that the program directors across the hospital talk to each other, and so I don't know, kind of, if you probably have had more specific advice than that, but that's kind of all I can add from what I know, is that definitely reach out to the program leadership in both of your specialties. Make sure the program leadership knows that your partner also interviewed there, and that you're both interested in going together, because that may change where they rank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I know it's hard when, obviously none of you couples match, so it's hard to understand what the process is like, but thank you for that. One other question that we had is, if you do have more questions about a program, I know someone said that their rank list might already be closed and certified for their program, but say they're not in their top 3, but maybe they're 4, 5, or 6. Who should they talk to? Should they reach out to other residents? Should they do program director, program coordinator, a combination of all of those? Does it matter what the questions are? Could you kind of just share about maybe if you reached out after your interview and who you talked to?
So I didn't reach out to anybody because, like I said earlier, I was terrified that I was going to come off as a tryhard or something. But at least for me, if I give out my contact information, I'm really okay with you using it. I'm sure that most every other resident that's been, that gives out contact information is the same way. We live this day to day. So, if you've got a question about, the life of a resident at that program, reach out to us because we know what it's like. Like I said, we live it.
But I also that seems like a lot of emails to write, and surely you are exhausted. So please don't feel like you need to do that. I mean, to counter what Chris was saying, I wrote handwritten thank you notes to everybody that I talked to on the interview trail. But I also it helped to kind of connect with people, and it helped me, be more engaged with people, to have something that I could talk to them about. And so, the people that I had a good connection with, like whether it was an APD or just another faculty member or the PD, I actually wrote them a letter, but at the time of the interview. I think, my post-interview interactions were a lot more limited after that. I don't think that I emailed program directors, but at some point, you have to rest. And so I think that if for you doing more is going to make you feel better, then go for it. Like Chris said, I think residents are going to be really happy to talk to you and answer questions. But everybody's tired. It's not going to, kind of, I think people know that if you're forcing it. And so, take a break, take a rest. If they're number 6, 7, 8 on your list, it's okay. You don't have to beg them to match you. You're probably in a good enough spot if your list is that long, right? So, but if you're not gonna be able to sleep at night, wondering if there was something else you could do, then sure. I mean, we're friendly people. We're happy to chat and get your email. So.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. If it's a program you're interested in, you really want to know more about them, reach out, try to talk to the residents. The other thing that you can do is reach out to the program coordinator and say, hey, these are my interests. Is there a resident that maybe wasn't at interview day that, maybe has the same interests as me? That's how I've been connected to a couple of our applicants, and we've had awesome conversations. And I also want you guys to know that as residents, we are not going to lie to you. We're not going to try and persuade you to come to our program. EM is a family, and we want everyone to be where they're going to be their best selves. So we're not going to, try and sway you. We're going to be really honest. And I think that's kind of just across the board with the EM residents that you'll connect with.
We have to work with you at 3 a.m. We don't want you miserable.
Exactly.
I feel like everyone mentions that, or you hear about that, like the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. test, and in EM specifically, and everyone talks about that. So, well, thank you guys so much for being here. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, but if you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with us as we are stressing out over our rank list, we would love to hear it. So if you have any final thoughts.
I'm going to put my email in the chat box for anybody that has any questions that might be specific to me. So please feel free to reach out to me, you guys. You guys are at the end of a really, really long journey. You have made it this far. This is probably one of the hardest things you're going to do. So be proud of that and know that things are going to work.
Yeah, same. You can reach out to me anytime. I'll throw my email in there. And this has been a really, really hard year for a lot of us. You are not in this alone. We are all rooting for you to match at a place that you're going to be happy with. And if you don't, reach out to us too, because there is 1 year is not a big deal. So I think on one hand, I'm pretty confident that if you care enough that you're already here and you're trying to hash these things out, you're probably in a really good spot. But this is, exactly like has been said, this is a family and we're here for you and we want you a part of this family. So I'll leave you with that.
Same. Putting mine in the chat as well. Trust the system. It's the hardest thing to do at this point. It worked for all of us. It'll work for you.
Yeah, trust the process and bet on yourself, because you'll regret not doing so down the road. So.
Well, thank you all so much for being here and sharing your expert advice. It's nice to see people on the other side of this. And to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. And our next Medical Student Monday is going to be March 1st at 7 p.m. Central Time. So thank you all so much. And I think we got all your emails, but we will send them out to the people that attended as well.
See you.